Order. I don't know if introductions are necessarily what we need to do. I think most of us been around. We have an agenda sent out. Any changes to the agenda that anyone wants to bring up? Hearing none. We also have a period of time in here for public comments. Do we have anyone from the public who wants to come in there? This is an open meeting. Hearing none. We have the minutes from the January. We haven't met since January.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So any changes or comments on the minutes from the January 23rd meeting?
One thing I will mention is that I think there were some folks that were in the audience at the meeting that wanted to kind of log in that they were present in attendance. And so if anyone was at the January meeting that we didn't capture in attendance that was not on the committee, please send me an email, let me know, and I can modify that in the minutes.
Okay. And with that, we'll go ahead and approve the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye or waving in the screen. I will take that as confirmation. We'll go ahead, approve the minutes with pending adjustments. Manager's report. Brian?
Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that you can see the packet, which apparently I need to pull up again because I don't have it open. Sorry, bear with me. Technical difficulties and okay, very good. Crap. There we go. All right, can everyone see the agenda on their screen at this point? Okay, so I'll scroll down to the manager's report. What I did here was I tried to go through some of the other items that were being worked on over the last few months and give you some updates on some programmatic changes. So obviously, just like everyone else, there's been some adjustments to our tasks and the way that we're working. And with that, we received notification from the Office of Economic Adjustment that they were across their entire, all of the grants that they issued were automatically applying a 12-month no-cost extension to the deadlines for any grants that had a deadline of December 31st, 2020. Now, again, because it's no cost, that does not mean that we're receiving any additional funds. It just means they're automatically extending the date, assuming that many of the projects across the country are going to have some kind of disruption as people adjusted. So we're still working it out with the Office of Economic Adjustment, what the level of funding that we currently have, if that might extend into January or February using monies, funds that we already have. So we're exploring that. And then we're also keeping an eye out for the next round of grant funding related to JLUS, what is now known as Compatible Use Program. We'll be keeping an eye on that and be coming back to this committee once we see if there's another funding opportunity for anything in particular that relates to compatibility and mission support through the OEA. We're currently working on task 2 with military information brochures. We're re-gauging those, and I just, in fact, chatted with our with James McMurray and the folks at HPNA today that we're starting to get back to work on developing some informational resources that could function online and also be printed out if needed. Task 3, which is the radar energy site mapping. We've collected some data and we're kind of seeing what it looks like within the mapping format, but it's something we haven't touched in a little bit because our GIS person has been tasked with some other things related to transportation. So we're going to return to that pretty soon. Moving on to task 6, real estate disclosure language. This is something that we've been kind of roughly getting some information on here and there. As a reminder, last year, middle of last year, we talked with Liz Peets, a government affairs contact at Colorado Realtors Association, to get some information and their perspectives on real estate disclosure language. And that's what kind of shifted us into Well, let's see what if we can create some standard language that could just be utilized, not as a disclosure, but as an informational tool during real estate purchases. And we chatted with George Neem at PPAR last week, and so we're working with him to develop some language. Once we get some language, we'll bring it before this group for your input and feedback. Task 7, the only thing going on there, and Keith Klain could probably speak more to this from the last meeting, which I was not able to attend, but Keith has been had been very active working with the military bases and state land board in some items related to buffering through the state lands, and trying to figure out what's the best way for the state land board and military installations to work together. But Keith, during installation reports or even now, feel free to chime in if you want on that one.
I don't start.
Yeah, I can talk about that briefly at this moment.
Sure, I'd appreciate. Now's a good time.
Their senior staffer last week. They're making great progress with the Air Force Academy. I'm not sure if somebody's on from the academy, and work out at Bullseye. Very encouraged by that. They're going to now start an engagement with Schriever as well, looking first to those lands or those interests, mineral rights and such that they have within the fence line of Schriever. And there are also ongoing discussions about a REPI on the outside of Schriever itself. So those things will pick up a little steam here in the weeks to come. Fort Carson, I spoke with the garrison commander there yesterday or day before. I think they're going to try and get an ACUP going for a strip of land along Highway 115 directly across from Fort Carson as an additional buffer. So lots of things going on still with the state land board. That engagement will easily go on through the end of this year into next for certain, but I can only say I think we're making great progress on that effort. Lots of folks probably on the call here that are involved with that, and we appreciate all the support.
Thanks for your work, Keith. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Keith, this is Amy Kelly. I just wanted to say welcome back. It's nice to hear your voice. And Greg's been wonderful to work with in the intervening weeks.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thank you, and to all of you for your support this last month. It was quite a fight, but I appreciate the opportunity to rejoin here after the month of April essentially not existing for me. So thank you.
Great to have you back in action. Yeah, thanks for the update, Keith, and filling in on that. I didn't have all the details at this point, but I'm glad you're here to provide those. So thank you very much. So yeah, we'll continue to, just on the JLUS side, we'll continue to monitor that just so we can report as needed how that relates to progress related to JLUS and so on. And then task 8, these are just some of the things that staff has been participating in, and I'm not going to go through these all, but that's the full scope of the activities aside from the other 2 items that are later on in the agenda. That's the full scope of the things we've been working on. And we've adjusted well to, we immediately started working from home. So we haven't seen too much of a disruption, just trying to navigate like everyone else, how to use the electronic tools to hold meetings and stay in touch with people and continue to work on things. So that's all I have for the manager's report. Are there any questions for me at this time? If not, thank you very much.
There we go. Helps if I unmute. Okay, next up we've got the presentation. We got 2 presentations, one from Colorado Springs Retool and El Paso County Master Plan. So Morgan Hester, are you on the line?
I am.
All right, take her away.
All right. Would you all, let's see, am I able to share my screen, Andy? Or do I need to?
You should be able to do that.
I can do that. I'll make you the host for now, and then you can change me back if that works.
Okay.
So you have now been made the host. So
okay. Let me share.
probably having the same issue I did. Where's the button? There we go.
I have too many screens open, so it's totally my fault. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Excellent. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time through this. This is the presentation that some of you have seen already. We've given this for our committee members as well as the public open house that we had beginning of May, City Council, and City Planning Commission. So for purposes of this meeting, I'm going to go through what we are doing now. And for those that are not familiar, Retool COS is the project that the planning department has taken on. I'm Morgan Hester. I am the project manager of this undertaking, and we are working on updating Chapter 7, which is our zoning code, to create a new unified development code. And we have called it Retool COS in light of keeping all of our major documents kind of in sync with Plan COS, Retool COS, Home COS. So the first module is what I'm going to go over today, and this is specifically focused on the zoning districts and use regulations. So again, Chapter 7 regulates zoning requirements for the city, but this first module is just looking at a piece of that. The timeline for adoption is the end of, well, actually the first meeting in April 2021. First City Council meeting. So we've broken this up into different modules to focus on this. And the project overview, I kind of went over this already, but this is in response to Plan COS. So Plan COS is our comprehensive plan. It established the vision for the city, and to give teeth to what that vision is, we are working on Retool COS. So we're updating the code. It will be more user-friendly, not just for the public, but as well as staff. And it will include charts and graphics so that it is easier to utilize. And we will improve what standards we currently have in light of, yes, development trends that have happened, but just so that it does make more sense specific to our needs. And again, Plan COS. The process overview. So the first box that you see here, that was accomplished in early December. We have consultants on board, Clarion Associates out of Denver. They are working with us on this task. The number 2 box is those draft modules that I mentioned. So we have 3 modules. The first, again, we're working on now, that's focused on the zoning districts and permitted uses. The second module is development and design standards, and that's where you'll find dimensional standards, landscape requirements, parking requirements. And the third module is focusing on review and approval procedures. And a lot of that will be administrative processes, you know, who can appeal a request, what goes to public hearing. The third box is what I kind of reference that as module 4. That's the consolidated draft. I do want to make the point for those that want to be involved in the public process, which a number of you are, and thank you so much for providing comments on the first module. We will not redistribute drafts after we get those comments because of the accelerated timeline. So all of those changes will be seen in module 4, again, the consolidated draft. That will be coming out at the end of the year in December. The fourth box is the final draft and adoption. So I guess if we're kind of staying on trend, that would be module 5. And the fifth is implementation, which again will occur after April 2021. Again, we're working on module 1, and in light of the time, I will not dally on these. So the way that Chapter 7, again, UDC, Unified Development Code, will be organized, this is all proposed, of course, no final language has been adopted yet, but this is showing how it will be organized. The intent, in addition to everything that I have mentioned already, is for this document to be where developers can go and find all the requirements that they need for a development application, hence the name Unified Development Code. So with the way that it's organized, we're hoping that that will be what comes of this. So we have reorganized what we currently have so that it, again, is more user-friendly. Footnotes are very important with this because if the document itself was redlined, it would essentially be unreadable. So what Clarion has done is they've included footnotes throughout the document, and those footnotes indicate if it's a carryover from what we currently have, if it's a proposed change, if there are questions that they have that, hey, we really haven't figured out how we'll handle this yet, we need some input. So for those that will be reading through these modules, please take note of those footnotes because it will provide additional information that should be pretty helpful with figuring out where it came from. So the first piece of this, again, is the zoning districts. And they have been grouped together based on their land use. So we have agricultural and residential, mixed use, special purpose, all of those different land uses, and the districts that will be part of that are organized in this manner. So the new format and organization is pretty big with this. Right now, our Chapter 7 is available online through Sterling Codifiers, and it's largely a text document. So with what they're proposing for the new format is what I am referencing as a two-sheeter. So if you were to look for a zoning district, these two sheets should paint a picture of what the intent of a certain zoning district is. So it would show pictures, this is the built environment, what it looks like, a purpose statement, if there are references to other sections of the code that fall into, you know, what those requirements are. And that could be something like landscape requirements, parking, etc. Additionally, there will be graphics showing how the setbacks and lot coverage will work. That's specific to the dimensional standards, which would be in a chart below that. So I will say I'm pretty excited about this. I foresee staff utilizing this two-sheeter whenever we have applicants come in and they're asking questions of, well, where do I find everything? Everything should be housed within these 2 pages. I don't know why it won't click, so I'm just going to do this. Can everybody still see my screen? Excellent. I don't know what happened there. Okay, so character areas. This was a big proposal in this module, and it's something that we have been getting a great amount of feedback on. The character areas come straight from Plan COS, and right now there are 4 sub areas being proposed. Basically what this calls for is additional standards, in a sense, for various areas of the city, and this would focus on the character, as the name implies, that these areas we see the development patterns are similar to an area immediately adjacent within this space. It would not call for new zoning, but it is saying, hey, there's some things that we want to maintain within these areas. I will say that we're still working on this and tweaking some things so that it works to meet what we are intending, which is, again, to maintain that development pattern. That could be historic, or it could be more of the newer development to the east. And you can see where those sub areas have been outlined on this map. Again, just a draft. We're still working on this. This is one of the big things that we're focused on right now. We are proposing through Retool a few new zoning districts. For residential, that is 3 new zoning districts, single family small, multifamily low density, and an R flex, which would also be for single family. The thought behind this is we've seen a lot of PUDs come in for different residential developments. And rather than requiring an applicant to come in, request that PUD, if we have hard zoning available that is reflective of what development trends have been within Colorado Springs, maybe that's an opportunity for a developer or an applicant to apply for that zoning and submit a development plan, rather than going through the public process of having to rezone a property through City Planning Commission and ultimately City Council. And again, this is reflective of those trends. Smaller lot is something that we have seen in the past couple of years. Mixed use districts. So the proposal here is to combine some of our existing zoning districts and recreate them into mixed districts. So as the names imply, there's a connotation, for example, with mixed use neighborhood scale, That would be more uses that are compatible with residential. So office residential and office complex are two zoning districts that are widely used now. The mixed use neighborhood center is actually one we haven't had much success with the mixed use districts that we currently have on the books. And we believe that it's because there are some requirements that really aren't super attainable by applicants. So we're hoping that retailoring this will allow for new applications to come in with that mixed use designation. We also have mixed use large scale, again, that is combining some of our existing zoning districts, and mixed use intentional and institutional, which again is combining. Form-based zone, which is largely within the downtown area, will not be touched with this proposal. Special purpose districts is largely those industrial parks, as well as airport, public facilities, and public parks. Overlay districts, we are maintaining the historic, hillside, airport, and streamside overlays. Something that you will notice here is that we have taken off the DFAS overlay. That's design flexibility. So some dimensional standards for example, residential zoning district. It allows for flexibility for smaller lots, different setbacks. Although it's being proposed to be removed, we are pulling some of those components into the dimensional standards, which will be seen in Module 2. There's not a cross through on here, but we are proposing the removal of the high-rise overlay, and I do not want to cause any alarm with that statement. We will still incorporate height restrictions within the dimensional standards, which again will be Module 2. Also proposing to remove the plan provisional overlay, and that those components will be redistributed throughout the language in the UDC. The wildfire protection overlay is a new addition. However, it's currently in place. The Office of the Fire Marshal enforces those requirements, but because this is a unified development code, we are incorporating those requirements into Retool. Neighborhood character overlay is also a new add to Retool, and that is looking at different areas of town that have development patterns that may not be in line with hard zoning, for example, R1 6000 or R1 9000. They could have developed prior to zoning requirements being put into place, and we want to maintain the historic character of that, rather than requiring property owners to come in and get a variance or a waiver to do something like put a deck on their property. So we have not yet made a map that shows where those overlays will be. That will take some time and lots of discussions, but that is something that we're working on with this. The ADU, accessory dwelling unit overlay, as many of you are aware, ADUs have been in process for quite some time. We are not proposing to establish any new requirements for ADU or new language. That is something that our department is working on separate and apart from Retool, but anything that is adopted will be captured within Retool itself. That also goes for telecom, short-term rentals, signage. There are some things that are not within the scope of this project, and a full list of that is available on the Retool website. We're almost done with these zoning districts. So plan development districts, PUD will remain. I have mentioned that we're trying to incorporate some allowances so that the request is not as prominent as it is now with those hard zoning districts that applicants can utilize. T&D is being proposed to be removed. It's been used one time within the city, and that's Gold Hill Mesa. The proposal with this is to convert that to PUD. Again, a proposal, we have to figure out how all of this will work, but this is part of Module 1. Okay, so key changes, I've largely gone over this with the new zoning districts and renames. Again, mixed use is a big piece of this, combining those existing districts that we have now. Largely they are commercial and industrial districts. Overlay, I did discuss that, as well as ADUs. Okay, use regulations. This is another big component of Module 1. This is largely focused on the use table. So we have established zoning districts. The use table establishes what is permitted within those associated districts. So we will have literally a use table within the document, and I will go over the structure of this. So if one were to look through the UDC, they would see this chart, and everything has been pointed out what it means. So the first, across the top, it calls out what uses are permitted, required to get a conditional use. So that typically goes through CPC. That's not an administrative request. A is for accessory uses, and that's accessory to the primary use. T, temporary use. V is something that's new with this proposal. This is allowing for different uses if the structure on site has been vacant for 5 years or more. So that could be something like, we have a Kmart that's been, the site's been defunct for maybe 12 years. Well, if it meets that threshold of 5 years or more, a use that may not otherwise be permitted could be allowed within that building. R is allowed pursuant to a regulating plan, and that could be something like a master plan specific to that development. The number 2 shows the new zoning district, and underneath that is existing zone district. This will be utilized for a while until everybody is comfortable with the new nomenclature and we're able to find things. So it won't be there forever. 3, which will be the blue bar across, is the land use. So that could be residential, agriculture, commercial. So that's more of the general naming convention for those uses. Number 4 is the specific use. And something that they did not point out, and hopefully, yes, you can see my mouse right here where I'm circling around as use specific standards. This is something that's pretty handy. If there are additional standards that, yeah, this use is permitted, however, there are some things that you really need to consider before you submit any kind of application, please go to this section of the code. So yes, it is the burden of the applicant to do all the research, but we're trying to add in some pieces that it does make it easier for everyone to navigate. And they do go over it here. Again, that left side of the chart is showing those different uses. Across in the boxes will show any of those letters that I just went over, P, T, A, V. And there will be the reference at the top in case, so that nobody has to remember what those stand for. Again, use specific standards, pretty handy if there's anything in addition. So I have mentioned, this is the overall goal of Retool, but we keep seeing it that we're implementing those, Plan COS, simplifying the uses, reorganizing, decluttering. A number of staff are very used to using this document, but for those that are maybe coming from different municipalities, it has been a little difficult to navigate through. I say that because the intent is to make it more user-friendly for the public as well as staff. So we are consolidating a lot of things so that it's easier to find within the document itself. For uses, there's a lot of combining of different things, and a lot of this is due to aging of the uses, I suppose, what they've been called. So right now we may have a call out for a call center, a data center, financial services. Those are under the umbrella of office, and so by combining them, there's less confusion that if someone were to come in and say, well, I just want to have a call center, is that permitted? Well, if you know where office is, because that is the use, you're able to navigate through the document easier. Again, I went through these key changes, new organization and format. There is a point on here regarding human service establishment. Right now, the regulations that we have in place, there's not anything that is contradictory to what the state requires, but we are cleaning up the language just so that it's easier, again, for those applicants as well as staff to navigate through those requirements. I went over the vacant building. Again, I think this is pretty interesting. Clarion, our consultant, has seen progress and some good feedback from other jurisdictions that they have worked with. I believe this was implemented in Aurora's ordinance, who they worked for, as it allows for those properties that have been vacant for a certain amount of time to hopefully see some new life and redevelop the area, which does impact the surrounding properties as well. So the next steps, Module 2, which again, that's where you're going to find dimensional standards, parking, landscaping. That will be distributed for public review in July. Module 3 is September, and that consolidated draft, which I've also referenced as Module 4, will be December, so the end of this year. Again, we have a really accelerated timeline, but so far we've had some great progress with providing Clarion with the comments that have been received, and they're working one step ahead. So while we're collecting those comments, they're on the next module. We give them those comments, they can incorporate them. So it's somewhat of a wave-like structure. So that is all that I have to say with this presentation, but hopefully there's a little time if anybody has any questions about this.
Anybody have any
Morgan,
questions?
this is Keith Klein with the DMTF, and I'm not sure if the question is best for you or maybe Craig Dossie, but is this a collaborative effort with the county in any way? They're doing their master plan. Are there things that we want to make sure are consistent between the county and the city when it comes to some of these things, especially in the areas of standards and regulations, or are each of these plans kind of developed in a vacuum?
Keith, that's a really good question. So this document is specific to the zoning requirements and standards within Colorado Springs. However, I have been communicating with Mark as well as Craig on the document and sending the draft to them that if there is anything that we need to coordinate, we will do that. And I will say with what I've just mentioned, that if there are any comments after we've moved past a module and anybody is reading through and they catch something that, oh my gosh, we really can't continue without me saying something, please send those comments to me so that Clarion can incorporate them. So saying all of that, module 1, yes, the public comments period is done. However, it's something that, the county, this isn't going to work because of ABC, let me know. We can work with Clarion as well as the county or whatever other entity and get that worked in.
Okay, any other questions from anybody?
This is Scott Hobson. Morgan, I'm the Acting Director of Planning and Community Development for the City of Pueblo. And I just wanted to compliment you. That was a really good presentation. And I was hoping possibly that maybe we could coordinate through Brian with Pikes Peak to see if we could get a copy of the presentation you just did, because we're not in the same time frame as you guys. We're just getting ready to redo our regional comprehensive plan, but the next step following that is going to be looking at a unified development code. And so this has been really helpful. I really appreciate your presentation today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Scott. I will definitely get in touch with Brian for your contact information. And throughout this process, I'd be happy to share lessons learned or any information that you're needing so that you can get that kicked off in Pueblo.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? And Keith, good to see you back.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be back. I appreciate that.
Okay, next up, next presentation, El Paso County Master Plan. So Craig, you're out.
Thank
Okay,
you,
Brian,
Councilman.
what do I do so I can send it over to Craig?
What you can do, Craig, do you have a PowerPoint? You're just doing verbal?
Just verbal.
Verbal, okay. So Morgan, what you can do is in the top corner of my screen, I think you should be able to designate me as the host again. There's a little 3 dots, and if you hover over your window, you should see 3 dots in the top right corner that are providing a little option. And
No.
or it may, yeah. So if anything,
Well, looks like I'm in charge for the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, either that, it is possible that if you exit, that's the other thing. If you exit, it may revert it back. So that's.
I was thinking Morgan could cover my portion too.
Craig,
There
I
you
got you. I got you. I'll talk about it. Yeah, it doesn't say leave meeting, it says end, and I don't want to do that because then
Okay, okay. Yeah, look, see, yeah, you should have some options in, there should be an options for actions for you. And it should allow you to designate a host. Sorry, I put you in this position.
It's fine. It's a learning experience.
Okay.
I will say that my meeting after this was canceled. So if I have to be here for the entirety, it's totally okay.
Okay.
Craig,
Well,
you take it
see if you
away.
can- see if you can figure it out. Go ahead, Craig. Yeah, sorry.
You know, I don't know. This is kind of fun to watch. All right, so I will not be nearly as detailed as Morgan. Maybe that's more because she's more on the stick than I am. But we are continuing with the master plan. None of the stay-at-home, safer-at-home orders have upset our timeline or hopefully our ability to get it done by the end of this year. I'd forgotten that we hadn't met since January, so I think there's probably a pretty significant update to be had. Back in December, I believe, we presented the existing conditions report to the Board of County Commissioners. That report basically looked at everything kind of going backwards, what's been done up to this point, either by the county or by another entity. The destination master plan, which is a tourism master plan, the major transportation corridors plan, the parks master plan. There's literally dozens of plans. We don't pretend to reinvent the wheel on any of those kind of topical items, but we want to make sure that we fold those into the overall master planning effort. So that existing conditions report really kind of looked at a lot of that stuff, as well as some of the demographic data that we had to start with that are ultimately being used to kind of project out what the county is going to look like in the future. So we kind of, around the first year, we kind of turned the corner from looking at the present or even the past to looking more towards the future. And so right now we are at a point where we are pretty close with developing our place types map. And I would encourage everybody to go on the department's website, Planning Community Development website. There's a link to the master plan page. You can see video from our last two advisory committee meetings where we discussed the place types map and the place type descriptions. Our place types vary dramatically, much like the county does, from very rural to suburban to urban regional, to incorporated areas to military installations. So we have a big variety of place types. And that's sort of identifying, not only what's there now, but kind of what we might expect. And if you think about it, those of you who are familiar with GIS, you think about it as kind of the starting layer of GIS. Then you add in another layer, which is the second phase, which is our key areas map and descriptors. And key areas are places like some of our rural centers, like Peyton and Callahan and Ellicott. It might be the Pikes Peak influence area. It would be the incorporated areas. These are all key areas, and they're key for different reasons. For instance, like Black Forest, that's key for a totally different reason than you would expect the city of Colorado Springs. It might be key because of the timbered area and some of the conservation interest in that area versus, let's say, the Falcon area, where it's key because it's a growth area. That's an area that we're expecting additional growth. So that's the second of the three packages. The third, which is sort of still in the draft stage, but we're nearing a workable draft, is what we're calling our areas of change. Areas of change also vary from areas that we expect no change, either because they're more or less developed, or because they're areas of conservation, or it's national forest or something like that, all the way up to areas that we expect significant change. And those predominantly, as you would expect, are on the kind of the city fringe. I say city kind of in the broader context of Fountain, maybe Monument, and the city of Colorado Springs. One of the challenges has been that the city's annexation update, their update to the annexation plan is slightly behind where we are with our mapping for areas of change. So we've tried as best we can to identify, where we think the city might be heading long term, to identify areas of potential annexation. But we don't pretend to speak for the city, but I think we have a pretty good idea what that might look like. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of kind of the engagement by the public, or really anybody that can hear my voice. We are going to be releasing those in 3 separate phases for public input. The first will be released on June 1st, and that is the place types map. It'll include a video prepared by our consultant that explains what place types are. It goes through each of the place types and what makes them unique. And then there's also kind of an overview document. And then lastly, where we're trying to solicit public input is on a map.social exercise, where people can drop in pins and say, we completely disagree with you, or we think this should be expanded, or whatever the case may be, as well as a questionnaire about the place types. So that's the first one that'll come out next week. And then every 2 weeks after that, you'll see the key areas, which will include a video and the same documentation. And then finally, the 2 weeks after that, you'll see the areas of change. The areas of change probably is, I won't say it's of most interest, but again, if you look at all these 3 components as sort of a GIS layers, your place types is kind of your starting point, and maybe the place type gets modified as a result of it being within a key area or within an area of change. So we're allowing flexibility in terms of the place type based upon some of those, I'll call them GIS layers, that might change how you might look at that place type moving forward. We've had a lot of input from our advisory committee. I know Brian's been involved in some of those. I know we've had representatives from many of the bases involved in our advisory committee meetings, listening and I think providing questions and comments. So that's been very helpful. I believe we even had the honor of having Peter Wysocki on the last one, which came as a total surprise to me. I was wondering who invited that guy, but we got some input from him as well. So, I think we're in a really good place, but this is kind of the critical part of the process. What we develop during the next, maybe 2 months or so is really going to be the meat of what people look for in a master plan. And that is, what are we going to be when we grow up, when the county develops? So, kind of an important time in the history of the county, in my opinion, certainly for the next 10 to 20 years.
Greg, if I might add onto that, all the information will be on the county's website under our department website and the link. We're doing a press release and information that's going out next week relative to the weekly newsletters and Nextdoor and some other things like that highlight these 3 different releases that are going, the place types, the key areas, and the areas of change, which also includes a questionnaire. And it's really important for the map.social to tell us what we're doing wrong or what we're doing right. And that'll all be through the website, culminating in a public meeting, a presentation with the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners in mid-July that summarizes all this stuff.
And Brian, or Mr. Chair, if I could add, hearing Keith's voice was like hearing the voice of an angel. So it is good to see Keith.
Well, that's very, very generous of you. Thanks, Craig.
Any other questions for Mark or I?
Hearing none.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the city's annexation plan, contrary to some rumors, does not include annexing the county. So we'll work through all that stuff together. Okay, information items. Bring up my. You got Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado Springs Airport Working Group update. And
Yeah, so
we have the chairman of our Airport Advisory Commission in the audience as well. So we talked about this yesterday, as you well know, Brian. So take it away.
yes, absolutely. So to give you a brief update, some of the things we had, immediately after the last meeting in January for the implementation group, a bunch of us went upstairs with the JVation folks, Peterson, some other members of the committee that were really focused on Peterson Air Force Base. And we dug into the details. It was mostly a conversation between Peterson and JVation, the airport, really kind of trying to, speaking some airspace and runway lingo that I personally don't understand, but they got lots of value out of it. So that's the important part. So that kind of set off some work that JVation was working on. However, of course, because of the pandemic and slowdown at the airport, we know that JVation and their work was put on hold for a bit. But my understanding right before I was crafting this this memo was that the airport was re-engaging JVation, as was discussed yesterday at the Airport Advisory Commission. And so we understand that JVation will start to be ramping up. And at that point, then we'll start to work with them on in whatever format makes sense to continue to make sure that we're assisting with Peterson Air Force Base and JVation and the Colorado Springs Airport folks, just facilitating any conversations that need to happen or any work that we on the JLUS staff side can do to support those efforts to make sure that there's good land use development patterns, of course, around the airport and Peterson jointly. So with that, we expect that we'll start to get refocused on that one as well. And then lastly, the last item is, of course, very recently on May 15th, and I might have the date wrong. It might have come on the 14th, but my understanding was 15th. There was the announcement that many of you are aware of the U.S. Space Force temporary headquarters would be located at Peterson Air Force Base for the next 6 years. And of course, with that brand new news, we thought this conversation may be premature, but I thought I'd just throw it out there and see what happens. Are there, for anyone this is the main point of this discussion here is, and I put in the working group actions just as reference, but what we wanted to find out as JLUS staff was, given all the things that have happened over the last few months, particularly with the U.S. Space Force, are there, and Airport Master Plan, Retail COS, are there some other items that we need to be paying attention to as we're starting to get into, continue on with the Peterson Airport working group? So I'd be interested to hear any thoughts. Again, I recognize this topic may be premature, but any input you could provide, any things you should pay attention to, we'd really appreciate your thoughts. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or comments.
Any questions or comments from anybody?
Trying to unmute. Sorry.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, this is Joe.
Yeah.
I think you're right. It might be a little premature to start. We just don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Okay.
For the long run. So as more information comes in, we can update the committee and work on action items to address issues that come up. And we don't know right now what's going to happen.
Okay.
Is that good?
Could I just add, this is Heba, I would add the thing to just kind of be aware of that we do know right now, because, you know, like he was just mentioning, there's a lot that we don't know, but what we do know right now is that they're expecting 1,400 personnel to come with Space Command. Those 1,400 personnel 800 of them, you know, are going to be civilians and 600 military. So I think you can expect that, you know, again, they're anticipating there will be a large, you know, civilian component or large civilian population that'll become associated with that particular command. Many of them probably already sit here, but again, just for frame of reference, those are the numbers that they're talking about right now.
And I would add that, you know, as we go through this process and we're working at it, you know, we at the state are going to try and really sort of backstop data requests for the communities to support them in their application process. But I think that, you know, Brian, your team has really gathered a lot of data that I think will help synchronize, particularly for the Pikes Peak region, you know, some of the benefits and assets that are in place. So I think when we get those questionnaires out in July, that, you know, it's going to become kind of a fast and furious race to get good, accurate, and cogent data. So I would just say, please be prepared to support that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, next up is Air Force Academy Area Working Group. Brian again.
Yep. So this is my only other one. Anne had prepared this, but just so you know, she's fine, but she had knee surgery earlier this week, so she's not present, so I'm presenting on her behalf. So again, she's fine. She sends her regards. So she's been, Ann Werner has been kind of taking the lead on on organizing and facilitating a lot of the stuff related to the U.S. Air Force Academy Sub-Area Working Group. And we were very active since January. And Amy Kelly, I know, had to step away for about 10, 15 minutes, so she may be back in time towards the end of this. But we wanted to highlight and provide kind of the work products and comments that have come out of the discussions that have happened over the 3 meetings that were April into May. And so we really focused on making sure we were trying to meet the actions that were noted in the joint land use study, as well as some of the recommendations that were within the completed air installation zone, the ACUS study, compatible use zone study. So we kind of, the first meeting was just to go over some of the actions that are within both JLUS and the ACUS, and there was consensus that there should be development of an overlay zone as a recommendation to the city for code updates. And so we spent the next couple of meetings going through various topics in detail. I know the meeting on May 1st was very long. It was about 2 hours going through minutia, wording, discussing the concepts behind how things relate to the FAA regulations. And we've had good participation from the Realtors Association, Kyle Campbell from Colorado Springs Housing and Building Association, all the jurisdictions. And it really has been a very a good conversation, and a lot of different perspectives were worked together and consensus developed around a lot of these things to make sure that we're making a recommendation that's not going to create more issues, but actually solve some issues. And so JLUS, mainly we did the research and tried, and HB&A and Tetra Tech as consultants, and just tried to do the research to support the work of the group. With that attached to this, you'll see the summary of that work, which were in 2 comment documents. We sent them in 2 parts. And so you'll see part 1 and part 2 that are attachment to this memo. And there you get the full scope of the recommendations that we had sent to the city. Now that, of course, we made sure to note that this is the efforts of the working group. We know that individual representatives, individual entities may have some additional comments, other things to throw in. So we made that very clear. And also with this just being module 1, we understand there could be some things in subsequent code that maybe there's something else we have to come back and look at again. But we felt really good about the outcome of our comments and felt like they were going to do good work with addressing some of the airport overlay district potential for around the Air Force Academy. And along with that, just so it's noted, we didn't, if you look at the existing code for the airport overlay zoning district that's in module 1, you'll see in there that it's mainly focused on the Colorado Springs Airport naturally. So what we decided was, rather than try to amend that section that relates to the Colorado Springs Airport, We instead created a subsequent section because the Air Force Academy was going to have a more narrow scope of what they needed. And there's a lot of things that were not going to be required that were required at the airport, but not necessarily for the Air Force Academy. And of course, the relationship with the Airport Advisory Commission, there's no need for things related to the Air Force Academy to pass through the Airport Advisory Commission. We didn't want to create some situation that might question whether we need to reopen the charter or anything. So we avoided that whole mess and just tried to keep it as simple as possible. So when you're looking through the code updates, that was our intent. That was the intent of the working group. Try to keep it as simple as possible and make things as consistent for both the regulatory side and the developers, so that whether you're developing out into the airport or development proposals out into the Air Force Academy, there's some level of consistency and you're not having too much of a variation. So if you review through those, that's what you're going to see in those comments that we made. And also feedback from Lewis Littleton, our OEA grant project manager. He was on the May 1st call, and he wanted to express that he thought that the working group was the exact kind of collaboration and discussions that they hope to get out of a JLUS implementation process. So he's very happy with the work that everyone is doing here. And so I want to pass that along as well, that he thinks we're heading in a good direction. So with that, just the next steps for the working group are what we intend to tentatively, and we'll see how things change over time. We're kind of wrapping up a lot of the things related to air operations compatibility. Next, we're going to start, if needed, discuss anything that might be related to buffering or conservation, if there's anything that needs to be talked about at that point, stormwater, and just sea and transportation. So we're going to start to broach those topics. These are not necessarily things that are going to relate to a regulatory standing or things with the Colorado Springs Code. As far as we know right now, it's just starting to talk about these issues and seeing if there's any other work that needs to be done related to those items. So with that, the main thing we just thought is, given all that review, oh, and I forgot, you'll see the an airport overlay for the 20,000 foot FAA notification area. That is basically the airport overlay zone that we were intending to recommend, because that's kind of the area the FAA requires for Form 7460-1 that has to do with vertical obstructions. And so we just made sure it was kind of coinciding with the FAA regulations there. And any members on the working group, if you want to add more during comments and questions, feel free. But the main thing we wanted to ask was just, given all this information we've just provided to you, and we're starting to move into some different subject matter, we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to say, give us some feedback and let us know, are there other things we need to be paying attention to as we move into the next round? Anything you've noticed with what we've done already that we need to go back and maybe take a look at? So this is your chance to let us know as staff, how are we doing? Is there anything else we need to refocus on or revisit? So with that, I conclude my presentation. If there's any questions or comments, please let us know. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Any questions, comments from anybody? Okay, hearing none. Heck of a lot of stuff going on.
It's been busy. I have not been bored at home, I'll tell you that much.
Okay, installation reports relating to land use. So we'll go around the horn. Anything for Fort Carson? Or do we have anybody from Fort Carson?
I saw Chris chat, I think it was, I saw someone on here earlier. Oh, there we go. There's
Yeah.
Chris.
Hey, Brian. Okay, Hal didn't tell me I had to brief anything, so.
If you got nothing, that's fine.
I don't have anything.
Okay, thanks. Anything else to add from the Air Force Academy? I think we've
Hi,
already
this is Amy
covered
Kelly.
y'all pretty closely, but
Yeah, this is Amy Kelly. I think between Keith Clayton's presentation and Brian's, we've hit on the two major initiatives that we're working on and that are ripe for discussion at this point. So I just want to thank both Keith and Brian for all the assistance over the last couple of months, pushing some of these things through, and the collaborative nature of the group. So thank you.
okay. Anything down from Peterson?
Yeah, this is Joe Elms. We're tracking a bunch of things that are going around, like the airport master plan, the city of Colorado Springs zoning, and the El Paso County master plan. We've been included pretty good throughout this process, and we're happy for that, but we just ask that we continue to be informed and invited to any meetings so we can listen in and offer any input or advice that we can give as it relates to the Air Force Base. Thank you, though.
Okay. I don't think we have anybody from Schriever.
We did have Darren Horsemeyer, I believe, was here. I think he was the only representative, but I'm not sure if he's still on.
Okay, hearing nothing, go walk around community reports. And any of the communities want to add anything? Nothing to report from Schriever. Got it.
This is Scott Hobson from the city of Pueblo, and just information on some of the planning efforts going on. We're also doing an airport master plan, which started right at the first of the year, and I think it's still pretty much on schedule. I think there's been a little bit of delay with that one, but Greg Pedroshi and our airport manager is working with consultants on that. We also, through Pueblo Area Council of Governments, are doing an update to our long-range transportation plan for 2045. And then, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be working with Pueblo County. They're actually going to take the lead in securing a consultant to start a updated regional comprehensive plan. So quite a bit going on in Pueblo, and hopefully there can be some coordination and communication, especially with the airport master plan with this program. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, we got a lot going on in this arena all at the same time. Good timing. Anybody else? Community reports? Okay, I think our next meeting is scheduled on July 23rd. We'll see if we're still via electronic or in person or a combination thereof, probably the latter.
And Andy, excuse me, one moment. It looks like Heba had submitted a question for Scott Hobson.
Oh.
Has Pueblo Memorial Airport finalized a joint use agreement with the Air Force Reserve? So I guess that's the question.
You know, I don't have an answer, Brian, for that, but I can find out, and if I can forward it to you, and then you can forward it on to Heba. I think the answer is yes, but I need to talk with Greg at the airport, and I can get that answer for you.
Thanks. And last thing I'll say is I'm sorry that I didn't have beverages and snacks this time. I'll see what I can do next time.
Okay. And hearing nothing more, we'll go ahead and stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.